Welcome back to the deep dive. Think for a second about those really huge shifts in your life, maybe an unexpected friendship or that job you just sort of stumbled into that became a whole career or, a relationship that completely changed your path. There's this powerful feeling, it's almost hard to shake, that those things weren't just random, that they were somehow destined. They felt fated.
Right, that sense that something outside of us is guiding things. That's deeply human. But what if we could take that feeling, that kind of mysterious energy, and actually turn it into something concrete, like a pragmatic strategy?
Okay.
Our deep dive today is really built around this specific framework we found. It's like a guide that argues fate isn't some finished script you just have to follow.
Uh-huh.
It's more like a complex equation, maybe a solvable one, that you absolutely have the power to influence.
That's a really interesting twist. So if we're thinking mathematically, what are the variables then? What's the core definition of fate we're actually working with here?
Yeah, we need to move past just, simple destiny or luck. The most useful definition we came across defines fate as this intricate interplay. It's got 5 core elements, all
Yeah.
active.
Okay, what are they?
Okay, so chance, which covers timing and random events. Then necessity, that's the conditions you're born into, the constraints. Then choice, your actual decisions. Time, how things develop and evolve. And finally, relationships, your network, your connections.
Wow. Okay. When you lay it out like that, you immediately see where the levers are, where you can actually have some agency.
Exactly.
And the sources you mentioned, they provide this comprehensive model, right? You called it an accountability equation. Tell us what that looks like.
It basically ties everything together. So fate equals your fixed framework. That's stuff like where you came from, your biology, your culture, things you can't easily change. Plus chance and timing, plus your decisions, plus your relationships. And all compounded by time. So if you accept that equation, the only bits that are really fixed are that initial framework and maybe some pure chance events. Everything else, it's dynamic. That's where you can build your agency.
Right. Let's start with definitions, though, because fate gets tangled up with other ideas. The sources list common views like determinism, providence, luck, even self-efficacy. We tend to grab onto one, don't we? Like saying, oh, I made my own luck, or it was just pure chance.
Exactly. And focusing on just one, like saying it's all luck, well, that can lead to feeling powerless. But the real practical problem isn't so much the definition we pick. It's the mental tracks we fall into after something happens. Those traps are what really cloud our view of our own agency.
Okay, so thinking traps. Let's unpack the big 3. What do we really need to watch out for?
All right, the first one, and it's everywhere, is hindsight bias. Once something works out or fails, we look back and convince ourselves, oh yeah, it was obvious all along.
Right, I knew it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's dangerous because it stops you from really analyzing what happened. You only see the one path that actually occurred, the one that survived. You completely forget the maybe 20 other ways it could have gone, ways that seem just as likely right up until the last moment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can see how hindsight bias feeds right into the second trap, which is survivorship bias.
Precisely. You hear the success stories, right? The entrepreneur who risked it all and won big, the person who quit the safe job and found their true passion. We see the survivors.
We don't hear about the failures?
We don't. We don't hear about the countless others who took the exact same leap and, well, failed spectacularly. And that gives us a totally skewed idea about risk and reward. It looks easier than it is.
Okay, and the third one?
The narrative fallacy. Look, life is messy. It's full of contradictions, mistakes, U-turns, just chaos sometimes. But our brains hate that. We crave order, a story that makes sense.
So we clean it up.
We clean it up. We replace that messy reality with a neat, tidy narrative. A leads to B, leads to C. Perfect progression. But why is that neat story so dangerous?
I guess because it's not true.
Because it forces us to learn the wrong lessons. If you create this perfect story where A inevitably led to B, you might completely miss the random factor, C, that was the real reason things happen. So you end up learning from a fictionalized past, which pretty much guarantees you'll repeat the actual mistake next time.
Okay, wait. If these biases are so powerful, how do we fight back? Is it just like trying harder to remember how messy it really was?
If only it were that easy. The practical countermeasure here is actually a pretty big mental shift. Stop thinking in certainties, black and white outcomes. Instead, frame your decisions, your big choices, in probabilities. Mentally assign likelihood. Say, okay, this choice, maybe it's 60% likely to succeed, 30% likely to be kind of neutral, and there's a 10% risk of this specific bad outcome, X.
Is putting percentages on it just about making us feel better about the risk? Or does actually forcing yourself to think in probabilities change something?
Oh, it fundamentally changes your preparation. It forces you to look squarely at that 10% risk scenario before you jump in.
Okay.
It makes you build contingency plans. It stops you seeing the outcome as just win or lose and makes you see it as a weighted distribution of possibilities. That shift from certainty to probability, that's maybe the biggest step in reclaiming agency from what feels like fate.
That gives us something really actionable right away. Okay, now let's get to the fun part, those moments that feel really fated. Meeting key people. You know, the boss who champions you, the mentor who guides you, the partner who changes your life. They feel like cosmic interventions sometimes.
They really do feel fated, and it's often because they involve this convergence of perfect timing, network effects, and, crucially, your own visibility. The sources point to three main drivers here. One is simply perfect timing. That person literally showed up at the exact moment you were ready or needed what they offered. Couldn't have happened a month earlier or later.
And the second reason has to do with our connections, but maybe not the closest ones.
Exactly. It's the huge power of network effects, and often it's driven by what we call weak ties. You know, that random acquaintance from years ago or someone you met briefly at a conference. They hold a key, an introduction, an insight that your close circle just doesn't have, precisely because they operate in a different sphere.
Okay, that makes sense. And the third reason, you said visibility. That puts the ball back in our court, doesn't it? Luck finds you when you're visible and prepared.
That's it. So how do we actively expand what the authors call our luck surface? How do we engineer more serendipity?
Yeah, how do we do that?
Well, there's a kind of formula for making yourself a better target for these positive chance encounters. Step one sounds simple, but we often miss it. Do things and talk about them. Share what you're working on, projects, side interests, professional thoughts, events you're attending. You have to be visible. If you're doing brilliant work quietly in a corner, nobody can connect you to that opportunity that's maybe just 2 steps away.
Right. Be findable. And you mentioned weak ties. How do we actually cultivate those connections we don't rely on daily?
You have to maintain weak ties, but with sincerity. This means short, genuine check-ins, people you don't know that well. Critically, though, it must be without a hidden agenda. Don't just reach out when you need something.
You're investing in the ecosystem.
Exactly, investing in the periphery of your network. And related to that, you have to actively start saying yes more often, specifically to small, low-stakes things. A coffee chat, say yes. A quick mini collaboration, yes. A small favor, try to say yes. It keeps the doors open without huge commitment.
And what about our environment? Physical, mental.
That's the final piece, and it's crucial. Change places and rhythms. If you feel stuck, chances are you're too embedded in a routine that just keeps generating the same predictable outcomes. So explore new communities, maybe try a different workspace, even just alter your daily commute. New inputs generate new chances. That's basically how you manufacture serendipity.
That's a fantastic toolkit for creating beginnings. Now let's flip it. Let's talk about navigating endings, because those often feel the most fated, the most unavoidable. A career that just hits a wall, a relationship that dissolves. We often just shrug and say, well, it wasn't meant to be.
Endings feel so final, don't they? So inevitable. The sources note that when relationships end, it's rarely down to one single mistake that could have been avoided. Often it's about poor timing. Two genuinely good people, maybe great people, who are just in totally incompatible life phases.
Or values shift.
Or shifting values, exactly. One person starts needing more stability just as the other needs total freedom, and those core needs just diverge over time. Or, and this is a big one, incompatible patterns. Things like ingrained attachment styles or fundamentally different ways of handling conflict that just can't coexist long term.
Okay, but if the timing was always off or the patterns were just fundamentally incompatible, how do you exert choice after it's over? It sounds like you're asking us to move away from blame, which feels pretty natural, towards something else.
Yes, the shift has to be from blame towards meaning. It's hard work, no doubt. But the tools here are really about transformation. First step. Actively focus on meaning instead of blame. Maybe journal about it. What specific lessons, what skills did that relationship actually teach you? Be specific.
But what about the recurring problem? If I keep ending up in the same kind of situation, same kind of relationship, same kind of toxic job, I need to see the pattern itself, right? The mechanism.
That's exactly why the pattern mapping tool is so critical. It forces a kind of clinical detachment. You identify 3 recurring triggers, what always seems to start the problem. Then 3 typical reactions you have. How do you consistently respond? And then, crucially, list 3 better alternatives you could consciously try next time. It externalizes the internal mechanic.
Makes it visible.
Yeah.
And for getting closure, that emotional piece, sometimes a ritual helps.
Yes, the closure ritual. Writing a letter, expressing gratitude for lessons learned, naming specific things you're letting go of, but, and this is key, not sending it, the closure is for you, not for them.
Right.
And here's the accountability check. That little phrase that stops you using fate as an escape hatch. When you catch yourself thinking, oh, it wasn't meant to be, immediately consciously add, and that's why I now choose to fill in the blank with a concrete action or mindset shift.
That is powerful. Okay, let's apply this to careers ending. People often take losing a job so personally, like it's a reflection on their worth, when maybe it was just a bad fit.
Exactly right. We often mix up two kinds of fit. There's person-job fit, can you actually do the tasks required? But then there's person-organization fit. Do your values, your working pace, your preferred leadership style actually mesh with the company culture, the environment?
Mhm.
If you leave or are let go because of a poor organizational fit, that's not personal failure. That's actually accurate data gathering about what environments work for you.
But career paths can feel incredibly faded too because of things that happened years ago,
Well,
right? We feel locked in by our own history.
That's the sometimes crushing reality of path dependency. It's this idea that early events, often quite random ones, like the first programming language you happen to learn, or the style of your very first boss, or the industry you fell into, can disproportionately shape and sometimes really lock in your entire career path afterward.
Wow.
Yeah, if you start out in a very niche field, it becomes much, much harder to pivot 15 years down the line. Just recognizing path dependency is the first step to managing it.
So we need ways to fight back against that feeling of being locked in, against that randomness. Practical workarounds.
Absolutely. First off, reframe jobs as prototyping. Think of them as V1, V2, V3. Each one just provides data on what works for you and what doesn't. It's iterative learning.
Right.
Secondly, consider the barbell strategy. Keep maybe 80% of your efforts on stable, reliable income and skill maintenance, but dedicate the other 20% time, resources, energy to higher risk, higher learning side projects or experiments. That 20% is your active investment in breaking out of path dependency.
And before even starting something new, a job or a big project, there's that pre-mortem exercise.
Yes, the pre-mortem. It should almost be mandatory. Before you launch, get your team together and imagine, okay, it's 12 months from now, and this project failed spectacularly. Now, everybody write down why it failed.
Oh.
Okay. It proactively smokes out all the risks you'd otherwise ignore because everyone's caught up in optimism bias. And finally, for ongoing learning, keep a decision log. Seriously, for every major decision, write down the choice, why you made it, and what you predict will happen. Then review it after 90 days or 6 months. It helps you distinguish empirically. Was the good or bad outcome due to my skill, or was it mostly just luck?
That last one sounds like the perfect antidote to hindsight bias we talked about earlier. Okay, this whole discussion really seems to boil down to expanding our options, making ourselves more available to good fortune, and increasing the probability of positive coincidences. So let's wrap this up with the daily right now tools for agency. We have to start with understanding control, right?
That's the absolute foundation, the circles of control framework. Think of 3 concentric circles. The inner circle is what you fully control. Your mindset, how prepared you are, your routines, how you choose to communicate, that's your domain. The middle one is the influence circle. This is where you interact, having purposeful conversations, giving constructive feedback, actively nurturing your network. You don't control outcomes here, but you can definitely influence them.
And that boundary is key. Because the outer circle is everything else, right? The weather, pure chance, the global economy, other people's independent choices. This is the realm you have to accept, not waste energy fighting. Accepting what's in the outer circle is, paradoxically, a source of inner strength.
And moving on to actually making decisions, we've got 2 really good, simple tools for immediate use.
The first one is so simple but really profound. The 10-10-10 rule. Just ask yourself, how will this decision likely feel or matter in 10 days? Then in 10 months, and finally in 10 years.
Right. It forces perspective.
Exactly. That structure stops short-term emotions or pressure from hijacking your long-term goals and values.
And the second one, the 3-door method, gives structure to your options beyond just yes or no. Think of door A as the safe, solid, predictable choice. Door B is a realistic stretch, requires effort, but achievable. And door C is the bold move, maybe unconventional, but you've strategically limited the potential downside if it doesn't work out.
The key being to consciously look at all 3.
Yes. Consciously consider all three possibilities before choosing. It stops you from defaulting to safe without even exploring if a bolder path had manageable risk.
Okay, but knowing the tools is one thing. Using them consistently, especially under pressure, that's another. How do we hold ourselves accountable? Make sure we actually implement these things.
That's where if-then plans come in. They're also called implementation intentions. They basically remove the friction of deciding how to act in the heat of the moment. The structure is super specific. If I notice X happening, like if I notice I'm starting to withdraw during a conflict, then I will do Y. Then I will take a 5-minute physical break and come back ready to use an I statement.
You pre-decide the action.
You pre-commit. It makes the desired response much more automatic when the trigger occurs.
And finally, that essential tool for extracting lessons, the post-mortem. Not the pre-mortem this time, but after.
Yes, the post-mortem should be done after every significant ending, a job, a relationship, a major project. You analyze 3 things that were under your control. What will you do differently next time? 3 things that were outside your control. These you accept, bypass, they were fate or necessity. And then conclude with one single sentence distilling the core meaning or lesson learned, leading directly to a new choice or intention. It forces you to extract data, not just wallow in emotion or blame.
Okay, we've covered the framework, the traps, the tools for beginnings and endings, and daily agency. To really bring it all together for the listener, how do we make that crucial distinction? How do we tell if something is truly fate unavoidable or if it's actually your task to deal with?
This distinction is absolutely critical. Here's the heuristic. If the event or situation is fundamentally uncontrollable and non-repeatable, think a truly random chance encounter, the specific timing of a market crash, a natural disaster that's closer to fate, you acknowledge it, accept it, maybe grieve it, and move on.
Okay.
But if the issue is recurring and influenceable, your persistent conflict pattern, your tendency towards poor boundary setting, your habit of ignoring clear red flags in jobs or relationships, a recurring skill gap that keeps tripping you up that is definitively your task, it's showing up again because you haven't fully addressed your part in it.
And the source made that point about leaving a job. If it's because the culture was genuinely a bad fit for how you work best, that's not escaping fate or failing.
Yeah.
It's a fit move.
Exactly. It's an act of choice, aligning your future path with your own fixed framework, your own needs and values.
Yeah.
That's agency.
So in the end,
Maybe fate is just the sum of your starting framework, plus chance, plus time. The meaning, though, that's what you choose to give it. Life mastery isn't about trying to eliminate randomness you can't. It's about increasing your surface area for positive chance encounters and using really good tools to master your own recurring patterns.
Okay, here's the provocative thought we want to leave you with today. Take an honest look at your life right now. What recurring difficulty, what specific frustrating pattern are you maybe labeling as fate or bad luck or just the way things are? When actually, deep down, you know it's your task to address using one of the tools we talked about today.
Mm.
Maybe it's time to do that pattern mapping exercise or run a real postmortem on that challenge that keeps showing up. You've got the guide now. The real question is, will you make the choice to stop accepting that pattern as destiny?